With Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak releasing, there is a whole bunch of new changes, balance tweaks, fixes, buffs, and nerfs that are being patched into the game that we need to talk about. Some of these changes are exclusive to Sunbreak, while others are implemented in base Rise 2. Within the patch notes, this is identified with a little Elgato ship icon that means it's part of the Sunbreak expansion, and mostly covers new features being added into Mastering. Furthermore, there is an absolute ton of details that are in the patch notes, so we won't have time to go over every single individual one, but we will go over what's interesting or important. So make sure to click like and subscribe down below to support the channel, and put in the comments if we missed any of the details that you feel are important and we can learn together as a community. I'm Paradise Central, so let's jump into it, starting off with the space required on your Nintendo Switch or on your PC. For Nintendo Switch, it's going to be 10.1 GB, while on Steam it's going to be 22 GB. So make sure you have enough free space available when you go to install it. Next up, we'll go over the weapon changes, and there is an absolute ton of specific details on the changes for each of these weapons. I'm going to give you a top level of what these changes mean, and you can see the specifics on the screen. We'll start off with Greatsword, and it's all buffs across the board, including elemental and status scaling increases, with some part break damage increases and attack damage increases as well. There's been a big buff to the hunting edge that lets you chain into strong wide slash as well as strong charge slash after landing, as well as it only costing 1 wire bug gauge now, and the wire bug gauge recovers more quickly. So overall, buffs across the board and specific buffs to hunting edge that will make it a little bit more viable. For the longsword, there's been some buffs, however there's also been several nerfs. Many of the jumping attacks have had an attack power increase, but there's also been a lot of attack power decreases or physical scaling reductions. Most notably, the spirit gauge aura levels, both white, yellow, and red, all have physical damage scaling decreased and elemental scaling decreased, as well as the spirit gauge aura levels when chaining into Soaring Kick into Helmbreaker have also had physical damage scaling decreased. Soaring Kick itself has also received a specific nerf to the wire bug gauge recovery speed, meaning it now takes longer to come back. So a mix of buffs and debuffs, but it does seem like mostly debuffs here, so people that were worried about Longsword being incredibly overpowered might not need to worry so much now, but we'll have to wait and see in game. We'll move on to Sword and Shield next, where there's been a variety of buffs, including attack power increases and elemental scaling increases. It even has some sharpness consumption reduced on Windmill. For Dual Blades, there's been a variety of buffs as well, including mostly attack power increases. However, Archdemon mode specifically has had increased elemental scaling, while both demon modes themselves have made it easier to go into Archdemon mode, so quite the buff to Dual Blades there. For the Lance, there's been a whole bunch of attack power and elemental scaling increases. Instablock itself has also been buffed, with the window of time to successfully execute it being increased, as well as the fact that you can now combo into Silkbind attacks after landing a successful instablock. Twin Vine now also only costs 1 wire bug gauge, and the blocking power is increased and the stamina consumption is reduced while the kunai is connected to a monster. The follow-up jump is also now aiming at the point where the kunai is connected to the monster, and Anchor Rage now has an increased duration on the attack power increase. For the Gun Lance, the shelling levels, both 4 and 5, have attack power slightly increased across the board and a variety of bug fixes. The Hammer has a number of buffs, mostly for the charged moves that increase the attack power, but also has some elemental scaling increases and status effect scaling increases. And Charge Switch Courage has been buffed with shorter charge times. For the Hunting Horn, a large number of its attacks now have attack power damage increased, while some even have Infernal Melody gauge build-up increased. Certain attacks also have had their combos changed. Attacks that previously started from a neutral position while standing still have now been changed to start from a moving position with a directional input. Neutral position now has a different attack and combo stemming from them. In addition to this, the Blight Negate Melody effect now gives +10 to all resistances, and the size of the Bead of Resonance skill has been increased. For the Switch Axe, there is a variety of interesting buffs, including attack power increases. Notably, the Axe mode Heavy Slam now requires a reduced number of wild swings in order to combo into Heavy Slam. It also has an increased modifier for part break and flinch, once you have the buff effect of Heavy Slam. For Charge Blade, there are buffs specifically to Morph Slash and Counter Morph Slash, with attack power slightly being increased, as well as elemental scaling. Ultra Element Discharge now has an increased height for the fire explosions on their hit detection, which is really nice to see, and the Sword Boost mode buff now lasts a little bit longer, making it a bit more viable. For the Insect Glaive, it has attack power slightly increased for a bunch of different attacks. You're also impervious to damage while using Recall Kinsect, Kinsect Recall, and Kinsect Harvest Extract, when you have the yellow extract already absorbed. For powder type Kinsects, they have a reduced knockback time when hit and a reduced amount of time that's taken between attacks after hitting a monster. This means they'll apply dusts more quickly and is overall a good buff to them. It also is going to combo very nicely with the new Powder Vortex move that's very powerful. For the light bowgun, there's been nerfs and buffs. Normal, Pierce, Spread and Shrapnel have had their attack power slightly increased. Meanwhile, the Sticky, Cluster and Slicing ammo have all had their attack power slightly decreased, stun values decreased and recoil increased. However, Silkbind Glide now only costs 1 Wirebug gauge. The Wirebug recovery speed is slower, however because it only costs 1 now, the net overall cooldown is much shorter. Meanwhile, the heavy bowgun has had the same ammo changes to the light bowgun that we just talked about, but the charge shots for the heavy bowgun have also been buffed with increased attack power and elemental scaling, and the Mech Wyvern Snipe as well as the healing Mech Wyvern Snipe have had their attack power increased too. Interestingly enough, the bow has a variety of buffs, including attack power being increased to jumping attacks and charge shots, while also increasing the elemental scaling slightly for charge shots, and the status build-up of coatings have been increased too. So overall, some nice buffs to the bow. There's also been an absolute ton of bug fixes to the different monsters and locations. My favourite personally is that when fishing, you're now immune to damage up until the point where you catch a fish and officially obtain it as an item. So if you're an avid fisher, you will no longer get knocked out of your perfect catch when you're about to just get the item you need. So quite a nice fix there if you like to go fishing. There's also been a lot of tweaks to base and facilities. The most notable ones are that when trying to make equipment at the buddy smithing station and you have insufficient scraps, you can now immediately trade the resources you need for the scraps that you need rather than having to filter through the menu to search for the specific scrap. There's also melding specific items being displayed first when selecting materials at the melding pot. The number of amiibos you can scan each day has been increased to 6, whereas it was 3 previously. You can also see how many Dango tickets you have at the canteen screen. There's more space being added to the item box, equipment box, decoration box and layered armor box. Talismans now have a lock feature added to your equipment box so you don't accidentally meld them, and the display effects of handicraft are now applied to your sharpness gauge within the equipment info window. There are some specific changes to monsters, most notably new turf wars have been added. The amount of damage you receive from monster attacks while mid-air have been reduced, which is really nice as an insect glaive or a dual blade users that specialize in aerial attacks. It's also reduced the amount of time a monster remains stunned after it's been stunned a certain number of times. So it looks like KO has actually been nerfed there, but it's not clear how many times it takes the monster to be stunned before the nerf kicks in. Put in the comments down below what changes you like the most or the least, let us know and we'll learn together. Also make sure to click like down below to support the video, as well as click subscribe if you want to see all the other Sunbreak videos that we will have for you guys over the next couple days. There's also videos on screen now that we think will be perfect for you and you will really enjoy, so make sure to click them, give them a watch, and then let us know what you think of them down in the comments. So definitely click them and don't miss out.